Welcome everyone to this special Christmas edition of the peer-to-peer webinars. Somewhat of a recap of what's happened in Pharma over the last 12 months, but perhaps we'll also say a few bits around Phraktion and maybe some of our successes over the last 12 months as well. But in terms of webinars, we've run around 15 webinars across the members presenting, but also one or two external speakers over the period, including colleagues from IQVIA. We've covered any number of subjects in our complex and fascinating industry. I think anywhere from early clinical development, the old artificial intelligence, which seems to capture people's imagination right now, omni-channel, we've visited a couple of times, even sort of areas as diverse as looking at sort of toxic leadership. We've touched on that in the last 12 months. So really a diverse mix of expertise we've actually had on show and been able to generate lots of discussion around that in the last 12 months. So thank you to all our speakers and audience for participation. So we should move on now. Perhaps next slide, Lucilia.
Okay, let's go.
So just to round up a little bit around Phraktion, we start off with our very bold ambition of changing how pharma works, really creating a digital online community of functional experts across the pharma industry. And if we again look over the last 12 months, great steps we've made in reaching this ambition. I think almost a five-fold increase in our membership. We'll be exiting the year a little short of 1,000 members, but really achieving that sort of degree of our membership early in 2025. So really huge expansion of the membership for sure, but also from a client perspective. We've interacted with 50 clients over the last 12, 18 months as well. So again, a growing picture of our effectiveness of actually engaging with clients. With clients coming to us proactively now, seeking the expertise that's clearly on show across Phraktion's network. But much more to do, of course, in 2025. Much ambition here to grow our membership and build up the business development also of Phraktion. So again, once again, thanks for everybody's help in achieving where we got to today and efforts into the future in 25 and beyond. So that's Phraktion, where we are today, last year, but into the future. And the immediate future is our next speaker, Lucilia. Next slide. So welcome to Lucilia, our next speaker. I'm looking at drug launch predictions in 2024. Why the proverbial poop hit or missed the fan? Again, Lucilia will take you through a fascinating year in our industry. Many predictions are made, many things maybe come true, maybe some don't. And Lucilia will take us through the ups and downs of the last 12 months in pharma during her next presentation. But I should just say something about Lucilia. So Lucilia is a very experienced medical communications professional with over 20 years experience in pharma. Lucilia has been a pioneer in using multi-channel and omni-channel strategies to manage organizations' reputations. She has worked on global disease awareness campaigns, medical education, product launches, and to show the honesty of Lucilia here, she does also state, I think, that some have always not been so optimal as they should have been, perhaps. But there we go. Perhaps we've always lived through that experience as well. Anyway, for this session, Lucilia is going to step outside her usual behind-the-scenes role to share her personal insights with a candid, tongue-in-cheek commentary of the last 12 months. Lucilia and maybe Phraktion across the network here, these are really sort of personal insights, and Lucilia hasn't worked for any company she speaks of today. And I think everything that you see will be in the public domain, but I think also it's important that we scrutinise and have discussion around what we've seen in the last 12 months. So with that, I think over to Lucilia to take us through your presentation. Thank you.
And just to add, I am also not a patient for any of these diseases, nor I use any of these medications. So, this presentation started in fall last year in one of these days with terrible, terrible news. And it's, all these emails that you get from trade media just saying horrible things about pharma, optimizations, products being withdrawn, scandals. Also, the situation geopolitical also doesn't help. So I decided to make a conscious effort to look for good news and bring a bit more positivity into my life, because as we know, the brain has a negativity bias. You remember better bad news than good news, so you have to proactively work in remembering the goods that you have. So that's how the good news channel was born. Also, that is the countdown that you have 30 good news from here to the until the end of the year. And one of the things I did was to look back to what was predicted at the beginning of the year, thinking that I would have a very easy job. It's just what can possibly go wrong. I just take a few of these and go with it. And I was, as usually, not very accurate in my anticipation, because a lot of these actually didn't went up to expectations. And in many of cases, we had the expectation at the beginning of the year of being a really good launch, and at the end, a crash, or a fail, or a major scandal. Or, as Deloitte would say it a bit more seriously than I'm doing now, more than a third of the new launches are in the United States fail to meet expectations, and out of these, about 10% are eventually withdrawn from the market because they don't serve their purpose. So right now, going back to working 20 years, it could be okay to do a more or less good launch. Right now, the expectation is either you have a good launch or the product will have problems moving forward. So, as Nigel said, I am a communications person. I worked a lot, many years as a public affairs, and for me, my gold measure is reputation, which means that I'm always at the center of communications and the messages they want to convey about marketing and their attempts to make people,
Metrics.
physicians.
Prescribe.
Sorry? I'm sorry, Nigel?
I think it was somebody not on mute, Lucilia. Just keep going.
And PR, how to get to the exposure, and in the middle of all this is reputation, and for me that is my KPI. And for reputation, for this presentation, I took 3 KPIs. They don't have to be numeric. One is approval, so is it or is it not approved, and what designations did it get to give some external validations to the drug. Also acceptance, how has the medical community accepted the drug? Has it been included in any clinical guidelines? Is the NICA give a positive or a negative recommendation for it? And then the rollout. I mean, the hard numbers, how many patients, how many physicians, sales, readiness for launch. And with this, let's start the countdown. So, I mean, the countdown is exactly the same on the Fierce Pharma list. So they have listed it on expected sales by 2028. So I just kept the same list and I'm going down through it. So the first one is the first anti-telomerase inhibitors by Geron. And this is one of these products that carry a very big potential for example, for diminishing the aging process. But their indication for the first of their approvals is very narrow, and they took a very conservative approach for doing the lower risk myelodysplastic syndrome. And this is what happened. So it was approved in June. We were waiting for EMA to approve. It didn't came. I could not find it. It is the first-in-class drug. It is the first anti-telomerase inhibitor, and it is still an orphan drug designation. So it was immediately taken up for the NCCN guidelines for national cancer. I don't know. And I mean, with a very specific indication to treat. And this company Giron was very, very organized, and the moment it was launched and approved, they immediately started to roll out the marketing and the sales team. So this was approved in June. On their Q2 call in the 31st of July, they had already 160 patients, and 60% of their physicians had been already contacted. So this has the hallmark for being a very good launch and being a successful product. So we go to number 9, and then we have ensifentrine. So this drug from Verona Pharma, again, this is the only one from the UK. I think the only European one, and it was approved in June. It is the first-in-class therapy for COPD, for pulmonary obstruction. And it was immediately picked up by the GOLD guidelines, which are the guidelines that which doctors use to manage this condition. So far we have about 5,000 prescriptions and 2,200 unique prescribers. So this is on track. I mean, this is a really new drug that really brought new hope to patients. It is the first time that is actually that modifies the diseases and can effectively treat the patients, not just alleviate symptoms. To number 8, and we have this drug. I cannot say this name. For blood cancer, for immunity bio. So, and having had all these accolades, being the first in class, being a breakthrough therapy designation, being an orphan drug, they have had a very modest pickup, only 100 patients being treated. And behind all this, it's not on this slide, but there is a number of litigations between the board, between the company, number of issues with the FDA about quality control and about manufacturing promises. So the company is actually laying off people. So this is a good product, and we cannot deny that we have the clinical trials to back it up, but the company is in very bad shape. So I don't know if this is the drug that will save the company. For me, it poses me a problem whether we will have this drug or this company will sold. So the launch was very finicky, and there have been a lot of last minute measures, like asking for the J code to get a quicker reimbursement from insurance company. But in general, I mean, this is not good. This launch could be improved, and the company doesn't sound being very solid. And we go for Moderna for a vaccine. I was telling Nigel that I don't like to talk about vaccines because everybody has their own opinion, and you quickly end up in a very volatile discussion, particular for this one. It is a seasonal one. We are in the middle of the season, so we don't have any data about sales and pickup. And behind all these, there are several litigations between Moderna and GSK and Pfizer about the patent and patent infringements. So it is launched. It was launched ahead of time. It's being used. It's on distribution. I mean, right now it is basically a lot happening behind the scenes, and I cannot provide any educated opinion about this, other than it's a bit messy. So we go to number 6, acoramidis. This is a drug from Bridgeview, another American company. The therapeutic area is for lungs. It treats PHA, so pulmonary hypertension. It is an orphan drug. It was recently approved. we were a bit unlucky about this information because they had the used to recall where they promised they were ready for launch, and then a few days after FDA approved. We don't have data about the launch, but this started to be an extremely promising compound. They had one clinical trial they failed, and then the market starts to get crowded, and at the moment is dominated by Pfizer. So from being an extremely good drug that would save these patients and be a highlight, right now we have a bit of a lackluster launch and a drug that we are not very sure how it's going to work. Their label is similar to Pfizer. I think Almilan and I believe Roche have another drug on the market that is probably more advanced than this one and had a better safety and a better benefit profile. So, I don't know. It's done. They said they are ready. It was literally 2 weeks ago, so we have to wait what will happen. And now we go to number 5. And this drug, it's the AstraZeneca. This drug was not launched. They are still waiting for approval. So this is what they have communicated, that they have voluntarily removed the approval they asked. They have submitted a new BLA, and now they are waiting. They have been very good in being open and transparent about timelines and about setbacks. They are resubmitting for a more narrow patient population. And the really interesting thing about these data DXD is that they are working very closely with patient associations and not positioning the drug as something as a part of the portfolio, but something that actually answers the needs of a specific population of patients. So almost this is a request by the patient. They delivered. We don't know if it is going to be a good product, but all this was worked together, patient associations, and it's actually them who have been pushing throughout this. And AstraZeneca has done a very good job in being open and transparent and providing a very rigorous communications about what is happening with this compound. And now this is like one of the best launches of this year. So this is a drug for PAH. This was like, as you can see from your left, you have everything that you could need. You have first-in-class, first disease modifier. It has an orphan drug designation, breakthrough therapy, priority medicine. So this is a compound that really is needed and needs, despite not being available, is already observing it. And Merck, MSD, says that it's gaining momentum and that the sales are actually ahead by 1 quarter. They have already reached their milestones. So this was an extremely good, this was extremely good launch. You could not have anything better than this. And then we have resmetirom. This is another first. So we have been for 40 years trying to look for a treatment for NASH, for fatty liver. It has not been possible. So basically management of symptoms, exercise, healthy lifestyle. So this is still going to be needed, but they have a drug that for the first time treats the root cause of MASH or NASH or MASLD. They have different names. It was also the news from, I believe, yesterday. It was approved by FDA in March, and we are waiting. It was imminent for EMA, probably at the beginning of the next year. And yeah, it has been rolled out. It has been very good pickup. There are no particular scandal. It has fallen very, very, helped very, very nicely into Merck strategy. They have positioned it as a again, not as a strategic buy, but as something for the patient. It was bought very expensively, and now it was a very challenged acquisition at the time, and now it is actually a very good purchase, and they hope to have their next blockbuster here. And then we go to the really to the very nice, the really ugly. We have the amyloid targeting therapies, and what is on the list was the Eli Lilly, and it joined the one for Eisai Biogen. All with the same issues, and this was one of the nicest thing I could read about this product, that imperceptibly slung in the midst of serious adverse events, including death. And behind this, there are like several scandals from safety, from conflicts of interest between the board of the FDA. So the physicians basically not picking it up. There is not the imperceptibly slowing. It's in practice, they delay the advance of the disease by 4 months with a huge risk of death. If the patient survives the treatment, they have 4 more months with somehow good memory. And I think this will follow the other Biogen drug that was withdrawn from the market at the beginning of the year. So they are still thinking about it, but it doesn't look good. This was not a good launch from a reputational perspective. Complete disaster. So, and this is a really cool drug. This is a really cool drug on the way it was done. It was a small molecule that worked but had horrible side effects. Then Karuna just did a review of the literature and found out 7,000 compounds that could serve as agonists. And then they did a bit of artificial intelligence, high computational, high biology computational systems to find out which of the 7,000 could be a good agonist for xanomeline, and it was trospium. So I can go really nerdy about this. So xanomeline targets a different receptor than the other drugs, which are dopaminergic with dopamine, and trospium doesn't cross the blood barrier, so it inactivates the receptors on the lungs, but allows xanomeline to bind to the brain ones. It was something that it was already marketed. It was withdrawn from the market because the patients could not live with the side effects. It was bought by $100,000 by Karuna, and then Karuna was actually bought by BMS, and they have a potential blockbuster in hand. So it was a number 22. You have the whole story in there if you want to know more. It was from drug development. It's a really good story. So it was approved in August. So BMS is committed to start marketing by late October 2024. There was a lot of commentary and a lot of talk with patients and with physicians. One of the problems is side effects, because the drugs that are dopaminergic, they have severe side effects like apathy, loss of appetite, gain weight. And so this one solves that, but they start to be nauseous and feeling unwell. But that is a learning curve; it goes away. And then the regimen, because these patients typically don't adhere very well to their medication, and the regimen it's a bit tricky. They have to take twice a day with food. So for them, this is very complicated. It was already a problem with the dopaminergics. This is actually a bit worse, and a lot of doctors asking for real-world evidence to see how these actually performed with the patients, which is sort of a trend. And I think we are going to see more and more this trend that the drug is launched and the doctors start to ask for real world evidence before prescribing, which puts the patients in a catch-22. They don't get it because there is no RWE, and there is no RWE because there are no patients having it. And this is done. So this is my last slide. So we have spoken about all these, from reputation, from positioning, from metrics, how these drugs fit into the corporate messaging, how the science is supported the message, and then how to get the exposure and how to make the patient and the public and the physicians aware of this drug. And this is my last slide. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Lucilia. So, I don't know, Paul, is anything on the chat right now? Or
Nothing on the chat, but Lucilia, my first question would be, is it a good year or a bad year in your view?
It is a good year or a bad year. It depends. I mean, from volume of sales, it's a really bad year, which is a trend. Normally the fierce pharma, how much potential has it? So this is half of last year, which was already half of the year before. So the drugs that are launched are the expected market is lower and lower. From my perspective, it was a good year because everything launched without bigger scandals, except for the Alzheimer drugs. So for me, the other thing that is a bit worrying for me, especially being in Europe and working mostly for European companies, is that there was only one European company in the UK. I mean, the blockbusters and the center of pharma seems to be now in California, where most of these companies are. Also, a lot of small companies and not the usual suspects. We didn't have here any weight management drug, for example.
Thank you. Just on a personal, the MASH drug, which
Yes.
is the new name for NASH or NASH.
Yes.
Do you know what severity that's for? Because we've done work on this as Phraktion with a company with fatty liver disease, or MASH now, is that most patients have it, but it's a silent disease early on. And just what level they've got a license, late stage, because I can imagine early stage, everybody's got MASH.
And before it gets the middle stage, actually, the middle stage NASH still to be used with, like the GLP-1, still with exercise and diet. Per se, it won't modify the disease. So, I mean, this drug is special because there are two points. One, it's the fibrosis, and one is the deposit of drugs. So it attacks both. So, but this is basically like before you get really, really sick, before you start to have scarring, this is when you should have the drug.
It's just, I know, because I used to work at Allergan, and we bought a NASH asset, and just about every asset that ever worked in NASH or MASH failed.
Exactly.
So this is quite amazing that one's made it through.
Exactly. I mean, this is the first one. I mean, it was the one that they described it as the one that escaped from the graveyard. It was like the regulatory was very, very strict. They were back and forth for a couple of years. Actually, this drug was twice in this list until this year because it addresses both aspects of the disease. So that is the first drug.
Thank you, Lucilia. Very interesting.
No
you do 20 studies, Paul, you'll get a positive eventually. So.
No, I know, and I think
there's
so many failed drugs in this area, and then the trouble is, if anything's early stage, it won't get paid for because there's millions of patients that have got this issue.
It is very expensive, though. I took out a part of the prices, but yeah, we were all these drugs are very expensive. Like,
I think it's going to be the statin of the next decade, but I think we'll see. I think it's going to be an epidemic, but the trouble is many patients, I think it's from first diagnosis, it can be 21 years to death, I think, in this disease.
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. You are quite right. I think this is going to be the statins of the next decade.
Well,
Other questions? Anybody else keen to delve into Lucilia's selection of successes for 2024? Sanjay.
I have a question. This is Sanjay.
Hello, Sanjay.
Hello, sir. And good list. In terms of AstraZeneca's DXD drug, you did say
Yes.
that initially FDA wanted they withdrew the launch indication still in lung, but then they went for another subset. Can you comment a little bit on that? What was
I
the
cannot comment on that. I cannot comment on that because they have not disclosed it. They just say they withdrawn the blah, and then submitted another one. And we know from the grapevine, from the commentary, that is for a smaller subset of patients, but we don't know which one it is.
perhaps Raz,
Raz, do you know anything? Because
I was going to
DXD.
add some thoughts on Dato DXD. I think it's a very interesting area. There's a couple of things I would add. So the drug was initially developed by Daiichi Sankyo,
Exactly.
and Daiichi then joined had a formal partnership with AstraZeneca. So in I think 2019 2019, basically AZ agreed to take over the commercialization of the three leading ADC assets that Daiichi had in their portfolio. So the first of those was TDXD, which I did quite a lot of work on. There was Dato DXD, and there's a couple of others coming through. And for those of you that have been keen watchers of this space, you'll know that the whole ADC space has exploded in the last few years with a lot of new entries, and Merck has also joined, developed a joint team with Daiichi for a number of the new ADCs coming through the pipeline there. So this whole space is really interesting and becoming actually very, very crowded. I think the two things, one I would add is that what it looks like at the moment is that because Dato DXD targets TROP2, which is one of the surface antigens which gets upregulated when you have resistance to particular pathway. What they've been looking at is actually trying to evaluate, are there particular patients that maybe have a higher upregulation of TROP2? And I think that's where, to address Sanjay's question, it looks as if they're going to be trying to identify those patients that perhaps have a higher expression of TROP2 as to their target population for the new indication. But obviously, there's a lot that is not in the public domain, so we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. I think the other thing to put into context with this particular drug is that this is not the first ADC that targets TROP2. There is also another drug from Gilead called sacituzumab govitecan. I love these names. They're just wrong.
You're doing very well, Raz.
And that already has an approval in triple negative breast cancer and hormone refractory breast cancer. So this whole space, there's going to be a blurring of the lines as to, which particular tumor types some of these drugs are used in, and potentially also combinations. So I think that whole ADC space is still one which is going to be evolving significally over the coming years. I'll shut up now and let
No. I mean, just to add to what you say, I'm working on a project developing content for a company that starts to talk about genetic cancer. That if you have this mutation, It doesn't matter where the cancer appears, you have to treat it with this particular compound. Just moving from the tumor tissue cell, and now from the genetic point. So you can have that gene. If you have that mutation, you can have different types of cancer. And then there is the treatment for that, the cancers that appear with that gene.
Yeah, so you treat the mutation rather than
exactly, you treat the mutation or the proteins for the mutation. Or even if you are even more advanced, you treat instead of treating the mutation, you treat the compound, the molecule that is defective that will cause the cancer before it actually forms the cell. But this is still in the realm of science fiction. Just building the market if the drugs live up to their expectation.
Yeah, that's maybe another key thing there coming around targeted therapy and the golden age science fiction now of actually treating mutations rather than being sort of so focused on particular tumor types. So
exactly.
A leap forward again if that sort of comes to fruition. I think there's been one or two examples already. I think over the years, sort of.
I just within the limits of my NDA. Because yes, there are tumors that you already know that if you appear, let's say, for example, in the lungs, that the next one will be, let's say, liver, as an example, and then that will be the same mutation that is causing that. So if you can treat one, you can treat the other one.
Mm-hmm. And the regulators will buy that as well. One hopes.
One hopes. If there is enough data.
I'm sure. Okay. So, a little bit sciencey there for a second, but any other questions, opinions, any inside track on any of the?
Well, just one that's close to Bruce and my attention at the moment is the rejection of MAPS for PTSD at psychedelics in the summer. There was a big rejection.
No.
This was the MAPS, which was the this is an unusual one because this is a psychedelic being developed by a not-for-profit multidisciplinary association for psychedelic studies, or MAPS, and they submitted a big phase 3 for PTSD with, I think this was, I'm just checking, this is MDMA, but they got rejection. So this spooked the market, but we know that I think this is purely a blip. I think there's more to come on this, I think, with some of the later molecules. But it's a very interesting one because having worked with a couple of companies, they got a lot of flack for this because, of course, it spooked everybody saying psychedelics are never going to make it. But then there's been some stellar data this year from mid-phase assets, which are really producing revolutionary results. So I think another one, good news, bad news. Bad news, one asset. Good news is I think there's a huge array of new products coming that are going to change the world.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the dissonance is that I was actually hoping that this would be my good news, and actually, the good news that I have are completely different from this year. Are completely different from this list. I mean, I only have 3 good news out of this list, and then I have, for example, the European Union making a legislation actually to incentivize the production of antibiotics, for example, which and actually 3 or 4 antibiotics being produced. So
yeah, we're supporting one company with an expert to help them develop one, just so you know as well.
Okay.
So Phraktion was approached to find a development expert in antibiotics, and we found one. So we're doing our bit.
We're everywhere, Paul. We're everywhere.
We're everywhere, guys. Microbiome, antibiotics. This is it. We solve problems nobody else wants to do.
And that was actually almost personal because I worked a lot for a gut microbiome company that actually there is a RWA confirming that it works. It is, which is
taken a long time though, because I worked on microbiome 7-8 years ago, and again most of the assets we acquired never made it. So I think there's a few tenacious companies still trying. So again,
yes, it is. I mean, humanity was overly optimistic about it. It is extremely complicated. It is extremely complicated. I mean, now that we solved the problem of folding proteins, maybe of predicting how proteins fold, maybe we can tackle microbiome interactions. So,
and I think there's even microbiome for mental health, I think, is coming as well. So
yes,
the uses are very wide. Nigel, there are no other questions in the chat. There was a lot of chat around Nash Mash. Nothing else at the moment. So it's only if there's questions in the room.
Any questions? Well, I was maybe just going to pick up, Lucilia, maybe just ask you the comments you made about lots of success in the US and California. I mean, are the reasons obvious, do you think? What are they doing right there? What do we need to do better in Europe, UK even? Or anything in there?
I don't know. I really wish I had a good answer for this, because I mean I live in Switzerland, so my big companies are here, Roche, Novartis, all these kind of things. What I saw is that they got too comfortable, and the pipeline stalled. Basically, that there has not been big innovations. That there was this. I worked for Roche. There was this joke of a guy that said they just sold a few drugs to justify the real estate operations they had, and I think for us that might be the case. I think it needs a lot more innovation and a lot more investment in innovation and collaborative projects. Like for example, the legislation for antibiotica. I think it basically we got lazy and a bit fat. Sorry about me, but it is being in Switzerland is the impression I have from this company.
Well, maybe we'll make a prediction for next year that Europe will come back in a more significant way.
Yeah, I hope so. I know Roche has a few good ones on the pipeline, but Novartis too. I know GSK has a few good ones, as well as you were saying. So I don't know. Maybe next year it will be the year of the European here. But looking at the volume of sales and seeing that there is basically no European drugs in that list, I really understood why there is why we are in the pickle that we are in Europe.
Okay. Well, let's look forward to a fantastic 2025, wherever you are in the globe, perhaps. But look to Europe for a bigger contribution for the same presentation this time next year, perhaps, Lucilia, and see where we are then.
Let's do that. Let's do that.
If there are no other questions, let's bring it to a close today. So thank you, Lucilia, for today's presentation, and also all our speakers. Apparently, there's far too many to mention individually, as I said up front, but I think a fascinating series. Much more to do for Phraktion, much more to do webinars next year, and look forward to interacting with everybody and wishing you a happy Christmas and a fantastic 2025. So with that, we'll say goodbye, au revoir.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Goodbye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.